Hi, welcome to Gospel with Greg. And in the video today, I have a part two to things that hurt our witness. So, a while back, I did a video called Things That Hurt Our Witness, and then followed that up with a video on things that help our witness. I was kind of doing some studying on this and kind of just felt like there was more that could be said, and wanted to share that with y'all in this video. And so, um, these videos are kind of, these in particular about witnessing things that help and hurt our witness, are things that I've kind of seen in my own experience, whether it was me personally or kind of other people I've observed. And so my hope with these is to kind of just offer some things that have helped me out, and hopefully help other people in the process, because as Christians, we should have a desire to witness and tell other people about Christ and what He's offered us and what He's offered them. And so, things that are going to hurt our witness, we should want to avoid them, and things that help it are things we should strive for. And so, it's my hope that in these videos and the others that I can help some others out, and kind of iron sharpens iron. But anyway, so just to kind of quickly recap, in part one of things that hurt our witness, the things I named off are not practicing what we preach, constantly acting sad and discontent when there's not a legitimate reason to be that way, like mental health problems, or maybe losing a loved one, whining, gossiping, and constantly making foolish decisions. And so the ones I'll discuss, some of them have a little bit of overlap with those. But regardless, the first one is basically overreacting or constantly having an attitude. And so this kind of overlaps with the one in the previous video about being discontent and sad all the time, because it's something that can kind of um, have a negative impact on the people around us. But I think with being angry or annoyed all the time can actually have an even more severe impact than those. Because think about somebody that who it just seems like they're annoyed all the time. It's annoying to be around them. Seeing them get so mad about everything kind of makes you mad, or it can. And I've noticed too, people I've met like that, I feel like a little paranoid around them because I don't know what's going to set them off. And, I get this knee jerk reaction to try to avoid them. And, when it comes to people, who just act like a downer all the time, I feel like a lot of people will give you grace, the first time or even few times you do it. But when it comes to this, it only takes one time for you to explode on somebody and, in like overreact in an angry rage for, them to just say, nope, I don't want to hear anything else they have to say. And so this is, one of the biggest and most immediate things that can kill your witness. Um, so that's a big thing that we should watch out for. Um, if you struggle with anger issues, that's something I would definitely encourage you to pray to God and ask for, His peace and His guidance on, because it's miserable to live like that. I've gone through times where I felt like I got overly angry about things, whether I expressed it outwardly or not, and I was just so miserable. And so, when we serve God, we don't have to live in a state of mind like that. We have the comforter of the Holy Ghost that lives within us and gives us peace. And so that's something to definitely pursue if you struggle with that. The next thing, number two, is, and some people might not like hearing this, but getting too much into conspiracy theories. And I will say up front, there are some people who will write off, biblical teachings as conspiracy theories. If you talk about, um, Christ's resurrection or the end times of the rapture, there are some people that write those off as conspiracy theories. So I'm not saying that, oh, well, if the world considers it a conspiracy theory, you automatically have to disbelieve it. But the key thing, point I want to make with this is to basically get too consumed with things that are, considered conspiracy theories that have nothing to do with our faith, because that can kind of kill our credibility. And like, if you have somebody that they just go on this big long rant of, I'll tell you, Bigfoot's out there somewhere, they're gonna find him, I saw him running through my yard. Or you go on this rant of, I tell you, I know the earth is flat and they're hiding it. Or if you get into stuff like that and you just rant on and on about it, and then you try to tell people about Christ, they're just, to be frank, you're kind of setting yourself up potentially for them to just think you're crazy, and then to just dismiss what you try to tell them about the gospel. They might just think that's just another one of your theories. If you talk about Christ raising from the dead, they'll be like, oh, there's another crazy conspiracy theory. And so it's good for us to think about that. And a verse of scripture this reminds me of is 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 23, that tells us to avoid foolish and unlearned questions. And so there's some overlap between that and this subject, because it speaks to the truth that there are some things it's just not worth getting into. Some things are just foolish, or, at the very least, not worth our time. And, even if you think that, you know, something like that does have some evidence. Maybe you have this idea of, oh, well, there's something I believe that a lot of people say it's a conspiracy, and it doesn't have to do with my faith, but I just really feel like there's evidence. Okay, well, what I would say to that is you ultimately need to ask yourself, how important is it to you to prove to people that Bigfoot's real, or, something like that. And, and ultimately, if it's going to hurt your witness, you have to say, do I care more about convincing people that this is true, or leading them to Christ? Because if you are a follower of Christ, it should be leading people to Christ. And so that's just something to consider. Number three, third thing that can hurt our witness is not having a filter with jokes. And this can apply to, telling dirty jokes. I've heard of cases like that before, where someone would tell, jokes that were kind of raunchy to especially somebody they didn't know very well, and assumed they thought it would be funny, and it made the person feel uncomfortable. So it can apply to that. But what I would also caution us against is falling into a situation where we basically harass people thinking we're being funny. And, sometimes friends will kind of pick at each other, and, they both, maybe they've been friends for a long time, so they know it's not serious. But, again, if it's somebody you don't know very well, we really need to watch it. And again, if somebody's voiced that, your comments have made them uncomfortable, it's best to apologize and stop it. Um, if you're visiting a new church and there's someone that you don't really know that well who's there, it's not the best decision to go up and start taking jabs at them about their weight, thinking you're being funny. And, again, if they express that they're uncomfortable, don't try to tell them that they need to get a sense of humor, or, anything like that, because it's just going to make you look worse. So that's just something to think about. Is what you're saying appropriate? And again, is the person you're saying this to, do you have the kind of relationship with them to where, if you don't have ill intent, are they going to know that? Do they know you well enough to know that you don't? So that's important to think about. Number fourth thing that can hurt our witness is not understanding boundaries. And so, kind of what I mean by this is, there are some people that they're very friendly, which that's good. I would encourage all of us to be friendly. But there are some people that will just latch on like a leech, like right away, and will just overwhelm people. And, maybe they'll try to push friendships on people, try to be somebody's best friend right out of the gate and really push it and overwhelm them. rather than let a friendship kind of develop, or, maybe somebody who develops a romantic interest in somebody and they just won't take no for an answer, or, just different things like that, just like smothering people. It can kind of overwhelm people and make them just not want to be around you. Um, but again, like I said, that doesn't mean don't be friendly. We should be, because I think another thing that can hurt our witness is kind of being too cold to people. And I actually mentioned that in my video on the role of the local church. I said that, sometimes church can put a bad taste in the mouth of visitors when they just act like they don't even notice they're there. So definitely be friendly, be kind to people, make some friends, but understand boundaries. Don't smother people to death. And the last thing that can hurt our witness that I'll cover in this video is when we appear to be dabbling in things we shouldn't. So we know that sinful things are things that we should strive to avoid, but the Bible actually tells us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 22, that we should avoid even the very appearance of evil. So we should try to avoid putting ourselves in situations that, even make it look like we're sinning to those around us. And again, people can misinterpret things, no matter what we do. But again, we need to not put ourselves in unnecessary situations that's just going to come back to bite us. And so, some examples of that. If you're constantly hanging out in bars and you're like, oh, I just ordered a soda, that's not what it looks like to people seeing you walk in there. Or, maybe you're a man who visits around different churches. It looks inappropriate to go out to dinner alone with married women, from the churches you visit. Again, maybe you don't have any ill intent, but that kind of looks like a date. And if the woman's married and you're sitting there alone with her, just not the best look. Maybe you don't have bad intentions, but it's best to just avoid that kind of situation. At least have others that are there with you. And so that's important for us to think about. And really, when it comes to these things, it's really beneficial for us too, because we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we just cause a bunch of drama and have these rumors about us over a situation where we could have easily avoided. And so those are the things that I had for this video. Hope they're helpful. Hope that you find them useful if you put them into use. And if you have any advice for witnessing, things to avoid, or things that are helpful that I haven't mentioned in my videos, please comment that down below. I would love to hear it. If you have any tips for me, I would love to learn them and to hear them. And so please feel free to do that. And until next time, God bless.